That would make me so happy.
That'd just be.
That would be like full circle.
Yeah.
We're gonna get the YouTube channel copyright, Zach.
That's good. I'm fine with that.
I forgot to mute my desktop.
Can't monetize our rounds.
I forgot to mute my desktop the first round. I was just listening to Travis Scott. So I don't know if that was on me straight or not.
What?
We started.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we have.
Everyone like has it, right?
That's probably right.
I sent it, right? Oh, I didn't send it.
Oh, I was about to say. I haven't.
My
What
bad.
did I got the details today? That's a scam.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of No One Is Watching This with your host, Zachary Zinneber and Drew Kapadia.
Oh my god. Zach, I'd rather listen to talk about it. Please.
I just find it really funny that, like, I know MBA is gonna go back through these recordings for DOC prep, and they're gonna have to listen to me do that. I know Jack Cody's gonna be like in his room at like 11 p.m. and he's gonna hear me do that.
Look how malicious that laugh was.
What?
Look how malicious that laugh was. Wow.
Yes.
You just love causing problems.
Oh my god. Okay. I'm gonna start the timer when the music starts. In the early 20th century, the Austro-Bohemian composer Gustav Mahler completed work on his Seventh Symphony. His most inscrutable work, the Seventh's first movement, begins with a slow introduction in B minor, launched by a dark melody played by a tenor horn. The accompaniment rhythm was said to have come to Mahler searching whilst rowing on a lake in Austria after a period of compositional drought. This story goes that after fruitlessly searching for music in the Dolomite Mountains, Mahler was finally set to return to his family and hired a bowman to row him across the intervening water. When the ferryman's oars dipped into the water, the music appeared to Mahler. The slow rhythm of the pull of the oar, the dripping of the water became the theme of Mahler's Seven, the rhythm and character of the elusive sound, its rivets, and five. Mahler's Seven Symphonies is the most notable of the Seven Symphonies of chronological starting two songs with the trouble working on find. The music he wanted in ferryman places over the water there was a rhythm of dripping water, which Mahler's mind became the theme of the first movement. He completed symphonies of Mahler piece that scares up to nocturnes of now complete music sort of leave it open-ended and settling nature and water. The sense of growing motion is so strong that it might have occurred without his explanation. The music and book 206 was a symphony for night as the work from transversal sound systems and converse as confirmed and steady within its form in terms of that of female wants to make with different species of origin movements are harmony colors a sort of chronic movement looks up at the skies. It is abruptly replaced by Orso's calls from a horn on the edge by another muted sound. It's given the distance the music creates an urgency in which every people investigating real things are forever going from my spooky hands of death. The Mahler finale comes up and say inside the grass is strong. The light on it, the hush of always flashes over the first movie could have been a memory. Could have been a memory. Mahler's Seven does not speak in nature's voice. Art keeps nature's promise precisely by breaking it. What this means is that art is inspired by the negativity of nature. Our works fulfill the mission of nature to reveal what we are not through raising an antithesis to it. It's a resistance to empirical reality as it's given to us by the culture industry. It becomes manifest. A resistance to the Kantian notion of constitutive subjectivity, where the concept coincides directly with the thing itself. This rationality is by all means profoundly irrational and instrumental domination and reflects a self-aggrandized history of the omnipotent subject. On the other hand, there is the freedom of natural beauty, which cannot be realized conceptually bound by the spell of nature, but must be recognized according to the non-conceptual, the non-identical. We must insist on affirming the non-identical aesthetics of the water topic of Mahlerian affirmation. One affirming of its non-identicality negates the negation of the Kantian worldview that shapes the topic and debate itself as Adorno. And 70. Art is inspired by negativity, it's different in natural beauty, so long as nature to find only through in society is not able to appear to be the resistant empirical reality. The subject martial arts, on the same time resistant mediated appears to nature becomes the receptacle of nature, no more from toxic empirical reality than does on to think of itself as more phenomenal rationality becomes aesthetic according to human tendency centered in natural, and the natural has been veiled by the mastery of the subject of the situation. Natural beauty is distinct from the domination of nature. Natural beauty is transposes to man's face, something like the song in the verse of the is not a song, but it obeys the elements of the nice art and demonstrates itself as fully complete from within us to explore nature is never continues in the subject of domination of nature. The more that art is like society attention, the more it speaks for not conceptually significant language of human language becomes aware of art. What rationality is erased from its portrayal. That's how all the advice possible to by chicken line where appears limited natural beauty cannot be copied even when nature's experience is spontaneously individuated. The centerpiece of ridiculous natural beauty is pictorial character of itself, literally things being a commodity for certification art or it appears in nature's ever of its being in itself. Art holds true to pure nature only where it makes landscape present expressing its own negativity experience of nature's constitution by the capacity to determine negation or meaning the expression of nature so to exchange relation between a nature reserved natural beauty ideology or terms of nature disguised mediated is from nature and big silence become a mere rare part of his image of nature's mind and complete negation of this reduces the rescues this image nature to open standards by the objectification and is a result of studied observation pure and means it does not suffice for aesthetic experience beauty reveals itself in persistent analysis to determine which is the element of equalitarian adequate knowledge of the aesthetic is a spontaneous function of the objective process that by virtue of the tension of the complex completion of term within it has the horizon aesthetic experience rated why you could account for the sublime natural phenomena overwhelming the grandeur became the constant perceived as beautiful nature which configured moral laws because reflect bourgeois megalomania the art does not imitate nature but natural beauty is such as phenomenon not only a word of natural beauty but the accord of aesthetics as a whole its object is determined negatively is indeterminable it's for this reason that art requires philosophy which interprets it able to say or is not able to say the paradox of aesthetics are to be saved through by its object beauty demands the slavish occasional person intolerable and things of weakness thought in the face of natural beauty weakness is subject to the objective intensity reflecting art thereby being destroyed by the concept the dignity of nature is that of not yet existing by its repression of repulsive intentional humanization for communication spirit utility the spirit is made one quantity among the rest of what is called meaning participates in this disaster the negation of nature is worth the affirmation of ourselves as species of subjects who have history and dominate nature however both of these formations are mythological we mythologize the purity of a concept of nature just as we mythologize its rationality a concept of ourselves like Odysseus the apocryphal tale of Western civilization we form ourselves into subjects above the natural world so we can manipulate it with our cunning art enables the revelation of what domination hides from remembrance of how nature became beauty that's floated and lettering the possible language can let everyone subject to medical center represent knowledge and contributing human subject of natural object magic practice and knowledge of nature on its own terms as humans are dictated as in rational form acknowledgement of nevertheless acknowledgement not discipline diversities humans with the total thought of kinship nature art preserving medical relation with the notion of identity study and arsenonesis thus not to be eliminating imitation of object within you stand before but with the thing that you stand before authentic argument works are artworks that express what is might be otherwise high single conflict domination nature the inner comedy obviously literally is an event of that reason I didn't see a struggle against political powers and the achievement of identity becomes the order of the epic self-identity organization of the mythical legends into a whole the artwork integrates nature and anticipating nature liberated from domination nature sublime of herself Adorno's attempt to reduce natural beauty and aesthetics and correctly believe in superiority of human reason nature is always more clearly completely conceptualized in nature dominates society after nature is born is not recognized only when nature is not received as scientific investigation and received as more nature whose imago art is rooted not yet any degree exists which human art is something not exists in the other is not concept of unity relevant unless you only experience more of a nature mediated through our work we become aware of not only mutilation of nature but also the possibility of radically transform society the instrumentalization of reason sent from content like freedom but it has become the principal domination enlightenment is becoming the worship of beings is not fully enlightened aesthetic rationality works Islamic and goes its hands to instrumental reason contrasting its image reality wants to make for years and medic link to another way of life at start and 98 increase rationality brought no corresponding increase actual freedom the only way out is really like expressing the art of culture of some knowledge is it's in the area alien nature artistic production involves using the compulsive work with liberties that rationality represents a non-representational art means to represent knowledge can be represented as non-identical an art that can represent society only as other means to stress the way the art goes beyond mere representation of the reconstruction art becomes rational continuing non-rational movement art but like medically you're not internal way like art it's but metaphysics always wanted to live nature within the and illusion this itself is ever our sincerely accident is reality is through illusion the rest party from enlightenment rationality which only rationality contains a non-instrumental rationality irrationality or instrumental reason art always leaves the remainder behind the remainder which is addressed in our art is accounted non-negative without limiting it to rigid categories the social deviance of art is a determined negation of determined psyche the art must be the language of disorders and faces of reason claims which art does both when confronted with the objectivity art marks new darkness myth emerging enlightenment moment transformation worship equality culture is all the game machine control method rewriting history descent the logic of the fact we call not stream became the dream factors culture and state as rationality and 7 a new terminus quality turns quantity freedom necessity emancipation new change of enlightenment and dignification out of nature science is on the power to donate the emancipation of our inner nature which are transforming institutional power over nature the clinic the prison school the factory bureaucratic and the culture and parallel new brutality racial ideology underscore the rise of fascism in realm culture industry culture of social education turn the machinery control place not even became succeeding accomplish and watch by any one unit and makes nature commodities identical any other this one more identity with the rise of culture industry organization also be a culture a difference of watch transfers global culture industry cultural objects of culture are no one the exception they are the rule.
what is the culture industry?
The culture industry is the production of identity as it relates to art. Our argument is that aesthetics now has been relegated to the culture industry insofar as we reproduce objects that are identical to one another rather than ones that reveal the non-identity or the things that cannot yet be defined about things like nature, right? Adorno calls this natural beauty, that which can only be accessed sort of by the aesthetic realization of things like the feeling of Mahler as he rows across the lake.
Producing objects that are identical to one another is bad. Art is good because it's unique and
Well, no, because not all art operates this way. I guess I can explain this better in the context of an example, right? So Adorno writes about the culture industry in the context of things like the repetition of the same tropes in art, right? I like to think about it in the way of like Marvel movies, in the way they repeat the same exact tropes over and over again in order to prime subjects for more consumption because they're able to produce even faster. The point of art and aesthetics under the reality of the culture industry is to produce more and more identicality rather than to produce non-identity, which is our argument. Our argument is anti-dialectical and is an argument that is premised upon the value that we find within what is non-identical, which cannot be accessed by strict definitionalism.
So I guess you sort of answered my question about why art is good. Why is having a debate about art good?
Because debates about art, well, I direct you to line the Adorno 70 card about how art requires philosophical interpretation, right? Our argument is that art in a vacuum is simply not enough insofar as art needs to be interpreted. That's the function of the first piece of evidence in the 1AC.
Why does like interpretation of art have to be adversarial?
Because it works better in the context of debate. We'll talk about things like Tibetan and Buddhist models of debate in which they interpreted things like religious texts in order to find and locate better aesthetic relationships to those objects of worship. We think that those establish better relationships to objects of natural beauty and the non-identity of things.
The model is good because it helps us find the best art. Cool.
It's not the best art, it's the best relationship to natural beauty. Art proliferates relationships to natural beauty and the non-identical in a litany of ways, and the point of debate is to introduce those different ways and to discuss them.
What if I find debates about the topic beautiful?
I mean, you can. Art's not just about beauty, though. Art can also be, like, Adorno talks about art in the context of communicating nature's suffering as well as its beauty. Right? So art does not always have to be beautiful. There's sad art, there's angry art. Art expresses a litany of emotions.
What if I find debates
the ad focus is
like not necessarily beautiful. What if I find topical debates meaningful?
Okay, cool. Like,
okay. Awesome.
Why does that matter?
Sure. The stark evidence says, quote, "This is possible insofar as the purpose of Mr. artwork is fundamentally different from that inherent in the means and relationship." What does that mean?
That's the distinction I was making between autonomous art, i.e. art that is actually able to access the non-identical, versus the art of the culture industry.
Okay.
Right? It's the distinction between those two things.
Sure.
The one is itself. It's 3 off in that case. Okay. Has everyone gone to docs / is anyone not good? Cool.
First off, it's the USFG that must take honorable action acting using the United States federal government. They don't meet first that's a text resolution calls for debates on federal government action. Erickson 3, trouble contained in agent in the United States, agent the subjects of the sentence of urge action, put a policy in action through governmental means. Second, protection water resources requires state action. Bosch 16, road protection requires regulation on the basis of administrative processes such implies defining activities use vote negative. Few reasons a person fairness. The negative should vote on average 50% of the time. Any unfair advantage is the reason they should lose. Their arguments are shaped by the drafting ones who presume their arguments are badly. Fairness is an intrinsic good is presupposed by the participation in a competitive activity. That's all in all. The present debates are one law stating that only one consent and one view rather than genuine exchange to be achieved by only by following rules for argument or other structural obstacles and ideas. Discussion have prevents its approximate use of those that's required for members preconditions for initiating discussion arguments processes constitution argumentation voluntary arguments consists of putting forth a position by one of the parties examination of the other discussion only realize that preconditions are satisfied by the Muslim partner carried application and standpoint that provokes a disagreement the commitment to rules this precondition as soon as possible isolate the subject to conduct a discussion the precondition requires mutual commitments by discussing how commitment the aim of discussion and resolution will not be issues based engaging all the pointless word conditions or conditions that can name a social requirement and identification as starting point to ensure inclusion exit is clash of faith about scholarship in the vacuum or not agreed reactionary engineering say a lot of times in their infinite perfect management because all they have to do to find evidence warning ideological orientation of the rule is crashes clash because all our negative structure based on practice and divine not defending clear active mechanism we lose 9% and negative around the half still retains traditional competitions and like parts of being negative possible clashes and choosing good and so the overall practice debate. Next up is campaign. Their aesthetic approach rejects capitalism technology. When he sees starting 1988, it's just instantly time of capitalism. All discursive cognitions become regressive. We must rely on our to oppose universal things forward forces, science, technology is possible insofar as the purposiveness of our works is fundamentally different from their inherent means having relationships with the capitalist world provides a model of interaction instead of liberality. Our works produces something that's setting up practical interstellar nature. Global techno-capitalism reducing poverty, famine, and death on 100% scale, rejecting that for personal approach only accessible to those who are already living in wealthy countries, sanitizing mass violence by having 19 their evidence on poverty. Evidence of poverty is nothing short of a miracle of provide poverty for that the total number of workers are to decrease the declining salary in 1991 1.76 billion is by 60%. Regional laws was seen low poverty reduction and ridiculous talk about eliminating poverty by 2030 is not just incomes. Comprehensive evidence sharp enough finding a single comprehensive measure that's not getting better. The average calorie was enough every regional world net to stand more than 90% of the world. People now have access to free water in 1990 only a bit more, in 1980 only a bit more than half the trend. Education enrollment is even sharper in 1980 fewer than half around school life expectancy is not a life expectancy about 28.5 years in 1800. The number of kids with 20 years that found mortality declines, especially fast, large number of self poor region, but nourished is way higher than 1998. Inequality was more measure of human well-being, increasing gaps are tricking health education, and sanitation, use roundly getting ecology, collecting essential technologies, global victories, it shows that we're doing more progress in market capitalism, we're trying to improve dematerialization, decoupling makes mastery of the environment sustainable, McAfee 19 dematerialization, that's just a fundamental principle, you do not want more, not more resources, Jeffens wrong, so I keep throwing that, but our use of resources, not Jeffens, what's wrong, to lose, be permanent, elasticity, to make a change, we're talking about logical change, go broad, clear, simple, and he made gas machine result of man, with every price decrease, but innovation, technology, aggressive, the couple of materials, companies rather not spend Jeffens, taking simple, resources cost money, to sufficiently realize how strong incentives there are multiple capacity materialization companies find ways to use more renewable energy, replacing oil, so however they're not mutually exclusive companies that do pursue all or innovation hard to oversee one that will continue to be underestimated innovation, not particularly related materialization accelerates our current time of great products, all things related to lines, overcome limitation lines, reverse industrial areas, computers help us with dematerialization of ending productivity, capital culture, technology, and paper aesthetics, cost of mass society, almost social collapse, extinction, Martinez, Iglesias, and Garcia 12. Classical mean industrialization only transitions for our you will not be able to maintain complex association will live similar lives, tracking with that species like the philosophy of energy, wrong decision mainly to economic regression, growth, social economy, no society, building opportunity, these that look, the many uncertainties and risk information drops people trade and interact less their overall less coordination, search one and decline that dark agencies and global war, so 1900 capitalism overtaking establishments in the launch and era of pieces, conclusion is reaching technological subject contractions in Germany, pursues warfare, declaration, territory, reports and advice order, or exaggerated elaborate and states and not experienced populist administration decision exceeding any one person, including President Trump phenomenon, has not sent to people that populist maybe wave are trending up to the largest firm. Besides these one expansion contracts, state one stability based on self-determination, war, becoming obsolete leaders, sensors based on behavior. The world is then game of permanent peace, tax solves everything here. Hey. Garth 17 renewable energy more efficient energy use, center markets and AI can bring us to zero carbon emissions, synthetic biology, degrading waste, essential is not being able to overcome the advances in technology, pandemic reason innovation, coming asteroids and portions of their path techniques prevent volcanic eruptions, civilization spreading beyond their enable advances, space value manufacturing, robots, terraforming, more likely to endure the alternatives on regulated capitalism, solves externalities while capturing upsides. We also 721 any anything on this idea is not supported. Capitalism not cost support, the best solution happen when for these not mutually turn against some historical movies, how can I have any alternative capitalism to drive all things low mortality, adding calories, minimize disease, large poverty, happiness, reduce war, higher rates, reduce racist opinions, literacy rates, all quantifiable consequences that way regularly capitalism essentially removes the deficits of less capitalism poverty will be more certainty or population food security, pollution and environmental structure, capitalism key part of dealing with climate change, national education, capitalism promotes peace, and capitalism what does be disaster, the psychoanalysis game. As projects in the failure idea of Muller and topics did unachievable from information only being a flash out. But go 13, the challenge psychoanalysis poses environmental story policies, absolute rejection, good society, then the table, not just a result of the anxiety theory, alliance, social conflict, physical, far enough, envisioning social order, no matter never did the others are the very from the idea of good, which proceeds is our ultimate self to get closer to reimbursement, emptiness, concealed fractal analysis. Good is not just out of realized ideal, but deception, people orientations, enable policies. That's under my idea of political change in the years right in order to help bring about change. That's repetitive, unfortunately, the instead of investing in YC going and perfection recognize that drive only can truly solve. Yeah, but go 13, the drive under MIT could be political calling or repetition, but this is on second only have negative value recognition, non-ball transformation, leave everything as it is just first recognition leads to sacrifices, basic purpose, all things recognition, and judgment which everything is self-limiting, so we have broad applies to seize listening, unenjoying and finishing, external federal surrender, and Jordan directly rather than sacrifice good for enjoyment. The case. Extinction outweighs bomb variety. Human ecosystem philosophy, all generation, 100 trillion, assuming it's human ecosystem, about 100 trillion times harder to prevent catastrophe than state personalized knowledge, running 1 million is equivalent to reduction in probability of catastrophe. China should make investment in GCR, maintaining reduction of error. After such a perspective, such as following error, and equally regardless who they are, this condition is very high value for easy GCR people. Let's no work hard since evidence there have been near misses. No impact people react to art differently. I thought the symphony was kind of boring, is that non-falsifiable? Probably, but if so is the app. Making a set of prior producer fashion politics, excluding honest accusation to label others. Suffering beautiful genuine too, and let's be someone who would make notorious and pages terms also understand what this tension and wrong, why political seems problematic, contrary wrong often. I didn't realize something another view is important that claim to be opposite of my thought of think suffer traditionality and politics in the sense would be equally different to such architecture artists claim the definition of that worth applied by situation imaginations versus those of the setting was the other vague individual. This enables a more to one of Boston Clare. That's a situation in politics in the case for because the showing way should not necessarily criteria to really exclude from consideration. Codes and justification when extended policies results are highly problematic situations that normally associated with precisely what is erotically appropriate in the case of prevention alienation can be occurrence without destruction. Aesthetic pleasure of the first order. Focusing on aesthetic provides no resources for dealing with trusty sure.
Should I skip this card or can I read it?
Sherwood 15. Deconstruction yields only more fragmentation effect. Only formula coherent based on little judgment effective intensity is ultimate value, assuming you cannot create and critique over little structure such as analysis of the masses opposite embrace such review for intensity right. I get intensity last structure by definition of coherent structure legal but little control condition necessary for being orally emerge for sustainable around the devaluation of effective conscious improves if you're in the synchronized nothing that helps them eyes of the main of fixed theory is like all principles of social association the biological equivalent of resource permanent origin society also sustain effective way of affecting man masturbation working the revolution biological programming and amygdala itself period effective intensity keeping for your social significance they want to eat the can do all suffer from lack of explanatory power. Adorno rejects your project after his doubles and burger. 90 Adorno's theories on philosophy anti-gardenism. Overall, needs to repress the evolution anti-gardenism. Continuing philosophy of modern music and aesthetic theory. Institutional concept of art working randomly excessively. Objectivity form can be accomplished work chances starting and claims that harmony from my aesthetic principles that continue to be harmony messaging arms held up. Mr. Woke criticizing a hypothesization of well harmonic totality. Concept of harmony is moment. No areas are touched by form.
Very good. Let me grab some water real quick. Sorry.
You've defined the topic as determined by a set of definitions, i.e. like Erickson, the budgetic article and stuff like that. What's the reason that the topic is defined that way? The reason it is the way it is?
I mean, we think like defining it that way would be good. Like we've read reasons why. It's like the fairness and clash offense.
Okay, so it's not precedented in any way. It's just you think it's good.
Are you asking like how we chose the topic? Because
I'm asking no, because I asked you if there's a precedent or if there's a reason why you picked those definitions. You just said they're good in a vacuum.
Well,
which
no,
means
just
so
those
there's
cards,
no precedent for your interpretation.
Those cards are in the context of resolutional wordings. They're most likely to show.
Okay, the resolution. Where do we get that from?
I mean, honestly, after the last two topics that were picked, you're going to have to ask the topic committee. But like, it was announced in advance.
Okay, so then why do we follow it if we're not even down with the resolutions the topic committee picks? Why does it matter?
I mean, if a new topic committee was formed and they picked the Russia topic, I'd happily go over to that. But like, this was the one that was announced and agreed upon.
Regulated capitalism. So. How is it different from the status quo?
The Budolfsen card says that like regulated capitalism would include like things that would help resolve like the worst excesses of like neoliberalism and capitalism. Would resolve like
what?
I think like the bottom or like near the bottom of the card talks about how like well-regulated capitalism removes deficits would like solve like poverty, resolve overpopulation, food insecurity.
How?
I think like obviously introduce regulations that solve these things.
What
It's not just like
regulations?
deregulate everything, but like
What regulations?
then
So stuff like antitrust to prevent market monopolization, things to correct various market externalities and force people to internalize the cost of pollution.
Okay, psychoanalysis. What's the link?
Ben.
Yeah, so an idealistic version of the topic is unattainable because we derive enjoyment from watching them fail.
Okay, where do the apps impose an idealist version of the topic? We said art is good. We did an art thing. Why does that impose a vision of the topic that everyone must follow, or
No,
an ideal vision of the topic at all?
This is not linked to topicality. Our argument is that you have presented a vision of the topic where like people can derive enjoyment from art. Our argument is that
Why is art not an expression of unconscious desire? Why is art not a means of expressing the unconscious?
Can be, but our argument is that attempting to say that like everyone should derive pleasure from art is bad because we inevitably derive enjoyment from
Why? There's a
watching it
distinction
fail.
between pleasure and enjoyment. Our argument is we should derive enjoyment from art. Why is that bad?
Because we like we'll read more evidence about why psychoanalytic theory
The
is
Sherwin
true.
evidence, it's a K of neuroscience and affect, which is a branch of clinical psychology. Our arguments are about aesthetics, which is a branch of philosophy. What is the dissent to the F?
I think the Sherwin piece of evidence talks about how like I think like near the bottom of the card.
Explicitly about affect. And it's about Brian Masumi.
I don't like obviously we'll read more specific evidence.
Okay,
But like the point is that
Sending it out.
The cascade psycho.
Seven seconds use. We're gonna do the board thing. We'll just write it on.
I'm messing the cards. Is everyone ready?
Yes.
History is not a positive rise from nature, is in fact a myth based on negation of the non-identical nature stemming from the post-traumatic and great revolution. No man's moved according to natural forces such as rivers, imminent to yet not transcending to yet the establishment of the home creates an alienation from nature, which define the homeland as distinct from natural forces. Contemporary environmentalism's inability to recognize this basis means that humanity is attempting to conceptualize nature when emerge with this person positive dialogue community that gives birth to the subjects. This is the essence of the continuous constitutive subjectivity, where we believe in our conceptual capacity to identify nature based on a historical phrase we took to mythologize the purity of the concept of nature based on our ability to accurately find and reflect the spin of the subject from nature under a flawed historical reason. This self-mythologization of the bedrock of enlightenment thought, the birth of enlightenment is the birth of mythos, rationalization is that which separates history from nature, the fleeing man from nature, reliance on instrumental rationalities and means to accurately conceptualize nature leads us to struggle to return to romantic vision leading to fascism, overcoming lending itself to mastery. This totally miniaturizing the nice beauty to disbase and natural beauty. Follow seven symphonies, five of the negativity, the dripping water, wars, rhythm is aesthetic, resistance towards natural beauty, towards beauty, nature is based on negation. The symphony is the non-identical that reveals length to certain knowledge to men and knowledge with the rationality that is autonomous. New rationalities and non-conceptual knowledge, no historical purpose from the conversation but about the internal, interrupting the given produce difference to the experience of natural beauty. Instead of theory, reorients constituents of subjectivity to recognize the fundamental inability to capture the nature of natural within our linguistic frame. 1T1 Newton's facts 4 of instrumental reason that these people as a means to end in an attempt to guide decision making. Prioritize that to be an intrinsic new view of nature as not a means to an end, rather end until 1T2 talk about the reaction. But what about aesthetics? So in totality, our running interpretation of nature that should be endorsed, help review. This is all of the depend on 1T now your own personal information. 1T3 there's only two. This is the aestheticization of politics. What worry about the politicization of aesthetics, putting politics before aesthetics creates a core for fascists because a lot of things that Mussolini into Italian thinking he's engaged with Italian futurism is aesthetic enough, but rather it doesn't ignore the way that aesthetic formulates the way political decisions operates in the first place. They concede our thesis that it doesn't account for conceptual challenge. Concede our thesis that words constitute be its conceptual basis means that politics only risks reinvesting in positive. Let's go frame 1T4 versus the constable to act as bad. It doesn't allow any sort of an aesthetic analysis that comes about through Mahler's affirmation that allows us to analyze complex situations in the first day. Second is that affect is good and inevitable. Anything else produces cold instrumental forms rationality. Proves the alternative of the can't cancel any more offense. 1T5 Adorno establishes his endorsement of Mahler through Mahler and music. His argument is that a philosophy and art need each other and vice versa in order to interpret each other. That was expanded 1T cross go to the cap. Go to the cap. That's not first is only given some history. Remember that the 1T last piece 1T evidence are solved cap which make this a regression. Second, they all solve the impact of the first digital to recent generates a condition for environmental explanation war by the rejection of non-human categories, which is divided through class paper no line other results and all the results linked are enough to not enough to resolve the office trees, no terminal there's no basic communist pipeline, even if it is it's two cylinder facts that have happened for the one other caps such stable that you can scroll over the link or really true that even our speeches and criticism lead to global collapse, which is not because there are existing communist movements far greater than the affirmative movement in neoliberal technology results in the war towards the tech that's garnered at all 17. Carbon positive rally market rally the alter. Common policy role in market rightly alternative action just common college regulation marketplace common policy reviews the climate crisis needs to fail because they literally take capital common contract capital policy for context and like capital social emission runs through cost signal obviously state conversion neutral use staying reduce view resource build by carbon accumulation on technology some approaches that the divine parasites alternate social not emission alternative as long as space also use like during the time you're increase efficiency lead to increase solar stuff she gave you outdoor so increase source use to grow vacation zero because they take further concept of production I use this with contributions because favor our not just special contracts green tech represents how much just really not to run social abuse emissions and psychoanalysis speak for sex operates as a production while conscious thought not conscious affirmation we have beyond argument is unconscious not fully noble so to use not identity not noble as well arguments and aesthetic affirmation bring us to align with our unconscious desire precisely because they reveal that about ourselves which are not consciously articulate and also firm we are of the law and affirmation a topic factor of further arguments or press off of premise offer inability to control direction we don't protection of the world we simply engage or we find valuable all things so their offense because they have an ideal vision of what their strategy is fashion is better explained by the alternative alternative this is the thesis I tip up the argument about the return to it's also self determined capital pleasure and red lines of team. Decoupling central basic giving force to capital giving force to capital coming stable and playing parents and possible income innovation build from construction zero point two way for roots productivity self income content remaining factors of tradition material about work to like fish every topic which again be terms of university is great research even like including several different pharmacy or restricting the utilization is a natural intravenous nutrient overall growth that can be called cycles and possibility cycles of slash green black and pure and then disorder regulation equal national policy be one to economic data material possibility coming was to make more energy and cost of our production of the works to no longer would actually based on second ground and also be used dependent demonstration dependent on cheap later go back to the captain the actualized stuff the whole regulations and antitrust is exact kind of fantasy which cannot occur for limits growth is exact or parts making the promise that political intent is impossible false will have to cater to an expanding level business not to get some language regulatory mechanisms antitrust or political suicide which creates circumvention they also don't assume capitalism can't survive through regulation age of building sources of material value increasing economic growth from abstract value like stock values large corporations trust business trust busting mechanisms would send capitalism cyclical disarray accelerates collapse which would cause a return to material consumption neoliberalism in order to secure growth they can't kick out of this because they said that's what the old does the framework debate framework operates through symmetrical lengths that make was this were maintained under certain state the space of stability before chaos if ignores like nature is inherently chaotic flow to rapid changes coordinators to talk about the community value meal said so really impossible to disposing chaos which is about keyboard three implications eight board the return to prior state or plan two that doesn't this is inherently anti-debate manifest in favor of the which manifest but things that look and never don't go the way which culminates in response how this is to make sure communities based on policy their normative activity and screening continuous racial scapegoating driven by the unspoken nature of capability terms for seconds responding to the question predicting opportunity validity with because restrictions so is the exact rationality of reason unidentified value the line of it authority institutions that end the discussion by shutting down what is up for debate through the perception of stasis this represses the non-identity debate because debate only occurs in the absence of instrumental reason which are an external impact of psychic program the concept of psychic program as we constantly search for meaning with a futile and speed, this debate doesn't have one monolithic interpretation for rather infinite non-identities. The history of the debate occurs as the repeated revelation of new non-identity stuff. Embedded incentives motivate change in the form of no fields, whole rest with chaos, being next update their ignorance, where we think we can return to goal by simply winging itself in the form of central meaning that brings the most sort of debate or a singular concept of abstract interpretation. This constant search to anchor meaning in a place where there is none is fascism, the seeking of the same hope, then for us to settle down for gauge clash, but presume the capacity to negate gauge as they double down this from integration and cause a future exile on me lash on this. You can view our confirmations or turn to who did the better bidding, but without defining what debating is aligned with and trusting that history of the non-identity debate rather than trying to essentialize debate when act to preserve this space is on time for production activity value concerns the clash of any historical every argument is a local focus on better nature debate firms reading message towards intellectual restraints debates original purpose for meeting or economic change culture to fumes for next firm ace points framework negates the alternative debates wisdom becomes for famous clash new tools one to like become a better active one's cause this is self-correction with considerable skills and taking reading territory the logic that is inherent within instrumental rationality law standardized the machine for finding one subjectivities recreates the method to secure something to be that generates a value from us management like deep water rights the second is the very basic interpretation is indicative of instrumental rationality the basis for predictability is their interpretation of the top via legal definitions. This ignores the words that color as well as being their emphasis on definitions and clinging to utilitarian notional language that assumes more implicitly and conceptualization is also impossible to force your brother non-predictable non-identity is incomplete analysis sharing zero policy for empirical cognition as that communication is an attempt at representation that only fails to force objects in conceptual categories and words in team. Communication means structure. We're not communicating this communication superior to utility towards one against presentation, communication, communication, and means to the same for communicating framework, which that which brings up the world's basic step for communication actions, even to tell functionality, pressure, orientation, for communication, ability, thing, like, content, achievement, that organization, how you set ways, are enforcing content, sexual language, recognition, part of how you very important, very life, etc., like, maybe currently help this subject more because their preferences can take segments that resist, but spending affirmation, not sooner, abstract growth, and speed up. So, reflective response, our communication, better within the world, this round, shines that force reflective reflex of the rational realm, and should be effective of the district or the intellectual example, political culture appears in the instrumentalization arguments, different construction, media, rationality, requires simplification, non-identification, informed understanding is non-identical, intellectual language exists one person, non-identical experience, of argument forces to approach general relationship with the of artists, speakers, reconciliation, should promote the open identity.
Was the card that you tagged like this is a double turn with cap anywhere in the doc?
Yes, that's like I read that on the lecture. Yeah.
Okay, that was not sure. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You go. The infinite non-identity is counterintuitive. I guess like what apps would be topical.
Our whole point is that we can't have a strict monoculture or interpretation of what has to be topical. Our whole point is that debate operates a repeated revelation of non-identities. Our whole point is we historicize debate as evolving from one set of arguments to the next. I.e., the community decides what is predictable based on a consensus. The whole point of trying to tie debate down to one sort of monoculture ignore the debate is operative based on openness rather than closure.
What is the distinction between
your impact during the attempt to make it?
What is the distinction between your and just not having
I just said we're impacting the way that interpretations operate in the first place, because they're closing down the way that debate has evolved over time.
Other than the communication decide, what other decides were there?
Okay. There are a good amount. So we first have this like thesis about how your interpretation presumes some sort of unique stability to debate, that there was a point of stability that chaos then infected it. Our whole point is that stability is impossible to achieve when the debate is inevitably chaotic. So the attempt to return to some sort of stable notion of debate that's not affected by chaos ultimately generates a form of community schism and scapegoating, and when it inevitably fails, the debate is chaotic and premised on non-identity and openness. That was the non-identity thesis I sort of explained above. And the second argument is that responding to questions of predictability with because the topic committee said so is an appeal to an authority that fails to find any anchor for value or meaning in the first place, which just creates a form of psychic burnout, and is the irrationality, tautology, and life irrationality in the first place, because it's unable to find any sort of terminal value to the activity, which will be if you go for a fairness only approach in the 2R as our response to that. And then there was also the counter-interpretation stuff, and then the next argument was like an impact turn about instrumental reason, how you retool debate towards some sort of external purpose of debating should help us become better advocates for one cause that in the real world we can go out and become better advocates and pursue more ethical policies. This is an instrumental reason I've used debate as a means to an end rather than an intrinsic good in and of itself.
Yeah, that's fine. The capitalism.
And there's also the predictability stuff, like the constituent subjectivity, which was the last one before I did the Morse card.
The capitalism critique, I guess like the stuff about how the like AF solves like the terminal impact. I guess like what does that look like?
Yeah, we have a competitive root cause claim, how environmental exploitation.
Sure. What's the
capitalism goes down in the first place? Our Durham card establishes just instrumental reason and viewing things as a means to end is that generates the incentive for profit motive in the first place, and we think that the AF solves this through the introduction of a new form of rationality, an aesthetic rationality that doesn't view nature as an end.
That's a good
constantly seek to exploit in the name of profit, rather not a means to end, rather to constantly
that's fine.
Rather end it itself.
The util stuff.
New form of rationality that I was sort of explaining with the frame.
Util stuff about like viewing people as a means to an end, or like ethics coming first. Like why is like preventing extinction not like putting ethic? Why is that?
Well, it's an impact term to viewing util as an ethical decision, ethical guide or rubric for how we guide decision making.
Our argument is that util has no means of anchoring value insofar as it can't relate to the aesthetic realm beyond like the realm of numbers.
So, hey, always not search for a hard truth. You need a one.
Yeah.
Two, truth is good. Because it's not the most opaque. The most imperial organizations ever were super opaque.
Yeah.
3 like awesome other stuff. Mainly the first one.
Okay, 7:20. Okay, let me send it out. Maybe the BizCon DA that we gave an alt, psychoanalysis K in the case. Send it back.
Sorry, what psycho K? Case?
Cap K and the psychoanalysis critique in the case.
Okay, check. This is cool.
Did you not think it was funny?
I think you missed a big opportunity to tag that like first like Adorno wrote its neg card on case. Adorno says Adorno.
That was worse. Okay, I sent that to the top. Okay, everybody good? There's like a. Oh my god, this is so embarrassing.
Send the wrong chain.
Last meeting.
I sent it to no. I sent it to one from Nutria.
Oops.
My opinion is they probably were never going to respond to these cards.
This is so bad. Oh, this is like the first semester.
You have to answer the answer psycho kid.
I wanted a card from that chain because I remembered it was there, so I was looking through that. Like, that's so bad. Oh my god. Okay, the card should actually be sent now. MBA and LFS are about to be really confused. Okay, I sent the cards actually. That's so bad. Okay.
I still don't have it.
I see.
Yeah, I don't know it either.
Yeah, just let me know.
Send it to a second brunch.
That would be really funny and comical, but I believe I did it.
Ah, there it is.
Okay.
Oh, come on, bro.
Okay. Everybody good?
I still haven't, yeah.
Does anybody does anybody?
I have it. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good.
What day?
Organized emails are really annoying. For some reason, when MBA sends us emails, we get them immediately. But like when other schools send us emails, we don't.
Just Wi-Fi.
MBA's Wi-Fi is also
Wi-Fi.
notoriously slow.
That's also true.
Like there's like a good solid 10 days we just did not have Wi-Fi, like a month ago. It was, oh my gosh, that was quite a change.
You still don't have it?
No.
Oh well. He's getting refreshed more aggressively. Seriously.
No, I still don't have it. It'll show up. My phone will buzz when I get. Oh shoot, my computer's in chargers. You're not. I'm gonna take the charger. Oh, no.
quick outlook. No, there it is.
Okay, we're good.
Are we good? Okay. The world is getting better. Poverty, mortality, disease, and inequality all decreasing rapidly. Enter a new era of peace in the absence of great power. Conflict and technology allows us to combat natural disasters and climate change. The after fuses this in favor of abandoning rationality, progress, technology, control of the environment, and capitalism. Independently, they've conceded the card that neither of us can pronounce. This technology is good because self extinction relies on adaptability to things like asteroid strikes, AI, and super volcano eruptions, all cause extinction, which means that even if you're correct that capitalism doesn't solve the environment, this is a moot point, which makes most of the impact turn debate irrelevant. This also turns the case that sex might be nice, but no form of self-actualization is possible when you're starving. Listening to music is only accessible to those who are in wealthy countries and have their basic needs. Only capitalism makes all of that possible. Yes, Link. Resistance to capitalism. Link 1 says growth and purposes of our work is fundamentally different from the interest in the meantime relations of capitalist world. Address these level claims that modernity is saturated with capitalism, that treating accumulation and consumption in itself is bad. We think that instead of embracing arts liberation, embrace production and consumption. Remember when you see cross-exact said, quote, the culture industry bad because it quote crimes for consumption is that will produce lots of objects that are identical to one another instead of doing original artwork. We think that producing lots of objects that are identical to one another is good because it's key to capitalist production. More reliance on this. When you see this, last 170, previous autonomous industrial culture came across into the becomes a special hint of the contribution capital culture. As visible as the resources and interests of the business profitability culture. This critique has become substituted under capitalism logic, environmental management, like this quote, like this is the apocalypse of civilization should we should form ourselves into subjects of the natural world so we can manipulate with our cunning. We think we should manipulate the environment, extract resources, and that's more renewable energy, move forward technology innovation, because abandoning all of that would kill billions of people. Learn this technology, like when he starts this quote, we must rely on our universal forces of science technology. We've been back trying to attack is good because it solves extinction. That was on the review, and even if they're fine with capitalism, they don't like technology or rationalism. They only see stark in 98 rationalism has become the TLP for technology and the gold war, the possible war achieving to unite right the face of every world of technological progress or turn around presumably mitigates rationality state like the method is opposition to collective governance. Actually, yeah, we're gonna link. I don't care about this. They said producing lots of things was bad in cross-sex. They say the actual the root cause. It does not. Monsieur Evans is really against it. Cites a bunch of data. They are not reading evidence and just sort of asserting that otherization is the root cause of all of war. Realism is true. States are motivated by power maximization and their own self-interest. They do not randomly go to war in order to otherize people. They do so because of shifting tides in the economy. Things like interdependence. Read evidence or leave because Monsieur cites a large data set that cites everything from the past 200 years. Cites the past 200 years. They're asserting a root cause of war without any evidence or sort of analysis. In this way, see, yes, internally, our argument is not that reading the 1AC causes the collapse of capitalism, but that deploying their project in the real world would be a bad idea because it's in opposition to the project of capitalism. The project of capitalism argument is not that reading this 1AC once is bad because it is opposed to capitalism, or that reading communism in debate causes the collapse of capitalism. Argument is that if you endorse this political model, it is bad, and instead you should just endorse the status quo, which is capitalism. They say that the critique doesn't, or they say the technology, or they say it's plugged by other people reading communism in debate. Non-responsive argument is not that you reading stuff spills out of the round. Actually, people can concede that nothing spills out of the round, which bolsters our argument on T, but adopting your political project is a bad thing. They say technology is bad. The governing card is terrible. The governing card is terrible. This person does not have any relevant qualifications in environmental science. Is a critical theorist asserting that technology is always bad and that the government cannot do anything right. No research charges and capitalism does solve the environment versus decoupling. That's mostly done about peak oil happened in 1990. There's incentive to use less because of profitability, and the EKC is true. It means that people will choose to use less because it's more profitable. Second is adaptability, solves and reveals this thing about and reason 20 lower. Growth location stability, mutation to the research markets for emissions internal social cost capitalism to integrate first and shocks economy, the cause of growth in the equality social structure of capitalism is that it's opposite disparities. Motivators capitalism with capacity to adapt for space and digital shell of resource crunches. Shamas in 19th for capital can be capital avoid evaluation because are not those digital spaces can be considered fixes the source of capital headings consumption basis, flexible reliable spaces lever, export of capital promising to deliver their available resources. There are $20 trillion there are $20 trillion checks up there. The other word in this card is solar radiation management, other geoengineering, and other geoengineering is bad. That's irrelevant. The card does not say that capitalism causes it. It just says that governments. The card does not say capitalism causes it. It says governments will try to do so that it's inevitable, regardless of whether they're capitalists. But whether extremes in precipitation risk are to the servant, using extrapolar regulators, electrical models from GFP, locations, exhibited moderate to exhausted the second tendency, neither commission or moderate nor precipitation exacerbation, optional increase the regional system represented, reserves exacerbation, maneuvering platforms, and adjustment solve races that is also handy. Ocean going platforms will deliver moving continuously from platform density, and stability can be controlled and executed ready for maneuverability into actual temperature, proliferation, cover, adjustability, virtuous is component is engineering is the possibility of something aspects over years and quickly we have to assign the temperature pieces we can keep it that way if we want it. My tea flow is terrible. I wouldn't look at that. Yeah, they say that it's double term psychoanalysis. No, we're not even going to extend the alternative. This was just meant to beat impact terms if you had anything spicy, but the spicy cards were terrible, so I'm fine defending the status quo. We are explicitly going to defend the status quo. That's consistent with our argument that McGowan emphasis. We should, quote, leave everything as it is. So affirming the status quo is compatible with psychoanalysis. We're not affirming any sort of new political project. We just think the status quo is better than the rule of the act. Alt vagueness, who cares? The status quo is better. I'm going to answer, actually, I'll do the double term psychoanalysis critique as well. Go there now. Concede the purpose of competition, not going for it. We're going to concede that psychoanalysis has no explanatory theory at the top, which takes out the double turn. And independently, this card does not say, this card just says that decoupling is wrong and is a fantasy. I'm going to answer all the warrants here. First, it says that consumption is inevitable. That's wrong. Caffeine and tea, just wrong. Almost commit without any use of resource. Essentially, making change. Reasonable reasons, most valuable psychology, making change for total never done without price increase. Materials, most many companies would not rather run that spending using yourself. So this is strong concept of reducing spending. Their card also says not fast enough. That's wrong. House Father 21. There's a doing the ability to decouple the ability to making the energy. The goal is modest because the van is falling worlds of the we go off the couple with the two if increase the countries up to the couple. The other warrant is offshoring. That's also wrong. House Father 21. The one perfect analysis. They ignore offshore structure changes and the resources changes that anticipation is working developing countries actually declined. And even if they are correct about the broader psychoanalytic theory, we're citing data that says this is happening. Yeah, who cares? Case. Extinction outweighs versus slippery stuff. Developing some others, that's why genocide equality is the only egalitarian measure of seconds. That's the only truly fixed logical state. Extinction not possible to be future value life returns the case that's found by Ventures. Any alternative is not logical. It inevitably uses utilitarian justifications. They say this leads to this means we treat people as a means to, and then this is wrong. This is about historical perversions of utilitarianism. Our argument would be that util would prevent this because exploiting people is bad and causes suffering. It doesn't cause any good things. No, analogous, not analogous. There are examples of historical perversions of utilitarianism, not our theory. The magnitude of the threat justifies nice liberty clause. Utilitarian calculations, short code 9. If an will harm the numbers of public health events, attention to use was the implementation of case areas, the further reform means our action should increase in the goodness harm the existence of the population. There's a greater proportion to the greater moral emphasis to them as hard product mixture, limited and more likely to these greater responsibility, and those universities of the body action cases to a higher obligation. Now, aesthetics is bad, that's the J evidence versus doing whatever structure fancy is fundamentally Trumpian, justifies ignoring evidence when making policy, which leads to terrible things like climate denialism or terrible criminal justice policies because nobody cares about what evidence says. Second is exclusive focus on aesthetics is bad, label suffering beautiful, and criticism to resolve it as instrumental. The second is the Sherman evidence. The aesthetic approach can't produce joy. The 2AC distinction is distinction without a difference. Aesthetics fragment to approach to politics means responding to collective action problems impossible. Even if you're correct about the sequencing argument about politics and aesthetics, it's just like the Bruce fascism. The masses in Germany were willing to embrace Nazism because of the intensity and the feeling they got from it, which is Sherman evidence. Third is the Bunker evidence. Using art as a political project is double turn of terms. Deployment of art is bad because it creates a hierarchy of art where only certain art forms are sufficiently aesthetic. That means rationality gets redeveloped because it uses hierarchies but with more paint. That's the Berger evidence. Rationality is not bad. We know it's not hard truth claims, but instead, I think that rationality can be self-flexible. We accept the hard truth claims. We accept that hard truth claims can't always be established by the iterative process of gradual improvement is better than giving up. Do you want me to start on T? So for 20 seconds. Reading overview.
Probably fine.
I'll start reading overview. Okay, go to T. Sorry. I don't have time for this. There's no risk of off office because debate is a game and the office know about it and the mechanism of substitution of the genetic conditions described in 1AC. There's only risk of off source to and back sources class of the foundation debate. Everyone agrees that the most debating beneficial to reason beyond dedicated to some activities because good debates require specifically in the group of point of status that it turns the case that not only is discharge require pluralism contestation, but it means the act should be considered generally unverifiable. Yeah. Just start with fairness and start with the overview.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, the Seamus card about sustaining a digital shift. Where did you get the resources necessary to create this digital shift to sustain capitalism?
Yeah, that evidence. Well, so a couple things. Yes, there are parts of it are about shifting to space. Our evidence says we have enough resources to do that because even if resource crunches are coming, those are like 2050 at the earliest.
Where does the card say that? That one you just said? Where you just said that we have enough resources to sustain this digital shift?
Well, we've read several cards that if resource crunches are going to happen, it won't happen until like a couple of decades at the earliest. I don't think you read a card that says anything to the contrary. Second, even if there is like a large amount of capital required to go to space and export capital there, it also says that broadly capital consumption is shifted to digital spaces, e-commerce, etc., that have way lower material
argument
inputs.
that capitalism is necessary for space exploration?
No, our argument is that this is a new frontier under which capital can be absorbed to answer your unsustainability claims.
Okay, wait. So wait.
This is to answer the resource.
So this isn't
crunch
like a
argument.
space colonization.
No.
This is just like
This
space
is not.
can sustain our resource shift.
Yeah, we can like mine asteroids and stuff to get on Mars.
How do we mine asteroids?
Well, you take a spaceship that goes, and then land on an asteroid.
Why is capitalism necessary? Okay, but What's the word for decoupling?
Hmm?
What is the word for decoupling?
Yeah, so Hausfather evidence cites a bunch of empirics, like when coal was replaced with natural gas, even when prices went down, consumption did as well.
That's just in the context of like coal and natural
Well, yeah,
gas.
that's because
Like,
price
what is
elasticities
resources
change.
more broadly?
That's because resource shortages change price elasticity, so it makes it more profitable to cut production instead of increasing consumption, which answers the like Gemini's
Okay,
paradox.
okay, stuff. When did aesthetics say that suffering is beautiful?
Sorry, what card are you referencing?
The J card.
Yeah, so the J evidence says that an aesthetic approach to combating collective action problems is bad because we romanticize suffering that happens, which is not good.
Why? What do you mean romanticize suffering? When did we do that?
So I think the better example is from I can't pronounce it. Oh, actually I can, sorry. The Sherwin evidence, which cites the example of like when the masses started to embrace Nazism in Germany, is because of the sort of intensity of feeling they got from it.
Like that has to do with anything?
Because aesthetics is the idea that like we should base our politics on our fundamental gut reactions to stuff.
What about the app was political?
Hmm?
What about the app was political?
That is sort of our argument. Sublimating politics to an aesthetic approach is bad because it means that we produce all of our politics based on our feelings, which leads to things like Trumpianism.
Last argument, the rationality isn't bad when we say that. When we say rationality itself.
I mean, you definitely said that on
rationality. What? No,
Instrumental
rationality. We dealt with a new form of aesthetic rationality. Never rejected rationality.
Well, yeah, or this is a defense of instrumental rationality because you're hard to say stuff like hard truth claims are impossible to ascertain.
Rationality to be self-reflective.
Like when you find out things are wrong, you correct for that.
Which takes time usually.
Sure.
What should I do?
7. Oh shoot, I forgot to take them.
I think I have you have 7 points.
Okay.
Is what I have written down.
Okay.
So a couple things. One, you don't have to be instrumental. That's about the advantages people choose to read. You can like, this is where you should be like TDA, do illogical.
Is that it?
I'm fine with that, yeah.
Okay, stop there.
7:14. I am gonna write it down this time.
Sorry, what did you say?
7:14.
Order's just T. Starting on like the overview or then left off that. Should be the fairness offense.
You said no cards, right?
Yeah, no cards. Okay. Anyone not good?
Second piece of offense we're going for is procedural fairness. This is an intrinsic good which is presupposed by their participation in a competitive activity. Yes, it is hard to explain. Yes, it is hard to explain its intrinsic value if you keep asking why does it matter over and over again. But this is true of any impact. Why is suffering bad? We can't really explain it. But I'll treat these statements as true because humans have a deep aversion to things like death or suffering, injustice, or unfair conditions. Leading into intuition is the only way to have any sort of coherent ethical philosophy. Procedures over substance. How we debate matters more than what we debate about. So if we win the clash impact, they can't weigh the app against it. The TVA protect water resources in an illogical way. Solve because it's not instrumental. It doesn't try to solve anything. You could just Kate decides that people try to root against you. We don't have to solve for your all of your offense perfectly. Just get into the same lib base and resolve enough of your offense to create good debates. Their offense. The line here. Couple top level framing issues for their offense first. First, that switching side solves all that you can read your K on the next. Solves education because it makes us more reflexive. Leads to the third and fourth line testing of arguments instead of monologuing. Second is that iterative testing solves that they're correct about the app. That the app is the universe. If they're correct about the app, people will begin to write their arguments around it. Third is that the content of any individual round doesn't indoctrinate us. For reasons, argument choice is driven by strategy. We all agree debate is competitive. That means any one round doesn't influence our convictions. I.e., everyone to say politics is that not because they think it's true, but because the topic is gigantic and strategic to read it. Second is that the second argument is that it assumes total passivity of the audience. We can all think critically. The fourth issue is that the edge doesn't solve forcing negative to abstractions like the state forces the negative to abstractions like the stay good or stay good counterplan or hedge good. The nature chaotic argument is not a comparable. It's an analogy framework is good. I'll do more obviously that was all the stuff I isolated in the top of all review, and there is a basis. The topic committee releases a topic every year. All defend why that is good when they on the specific arguments about how predictability is bad. The racial scapegoating, like pathologization, decide if T is neither pathologizing or nor monoculture. For reason, first that the neg is forcing the gate. It's more violent for us to negate the absolute substantive strategy because it forces us to disagree with individual autonomy of the right. That's how theory works. Second, propaganda isn't imposition. It's negotiation about how debates can massacre that has equal power to convince you that they're right about how the topic works. Third is that it's not intrinsic to the other examples of pathology. Just as in certain modes of debate are based on substantive inequalities and made not choices of procedure. Fourth is that there are tons of different ways to engage with the topic under a model that aren't traditional. Read spark on the app, use water prediction, crash economy, etc. Fifth is that debate isn't key. You can be aesthetic outside of it. Zero reason clashing over their app is key to solve it. Six is that they have a counter-interpret. It's bad enough for but it does. Settle on topic 7 is that at worst the TVA can solve those. Largely expendable. The stuff about how predictability and topic committee and appeals to the committee are bad is wrong. First, the they link harder. They make debate predictable for themselves because the app can pick any topic and become experts about it. All they have to answer is T in the cap case. Second is that the counter-interpolating entires tries to achieve a specific goal. That specific goal might not be rational, but it does connect to a means to end. Third is that no, there's no impact. Stasis in debate is not equivalent or equal to cracking down on people in real life. That analogy is uniquely violent. The counter term about infinite non-identities is functionally not a counter. It is functionally the affirmative saying that they do not have a counter interpretation. That any app goes. This means they don't solve any over offense because you presume the one is can't contain any set of words that doesn't create a particular research burden sets any limit on the top of guarantees any ground that app can defend any moral truism. Makes it possible to be negative, makes debates void of clash, switch side debate solves all their offense when he sees critique of the topic that is better in the ground and accesses all their educated best offense better. That was above the TV. Also done above just as the TVs are only net ground. Only net ground. The stuff about how retooling debate being bad. You can cross by all the stuff from the pathologization stuff and the predictability about the bad stuff, but independently two new answers. First, that there's no impact. Policy advocacy is just not the same thing as fascism in Europe during World War II. Second, that there's no connection to instrumentalism. Nobody ever said that you have to use advocacy skills in debate to be productive. Just that it should be an option. Instrumental rationality stuff doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be instrumental. It's just about reading advantages that cause things. At worst, the TVA solves don't have to solve. At worst, the TVA solves don't have to be instrumental. Just has the stuff about doing it atheologically resolves this. Also done by Ben in the 2NC. The defensive instrumental rationality, the imperial cognition descent. The last name T. Three arguments here. First is that T is not a search for hard truth. We just think it's a good idea for reasons outlined in the overview. Second is that truth is good. Imperial organizations are characterized by opaqueness. It's a good thing to recognize the truth and try to search where it prevents violence. Third is that at worst you can cross by all the other stuff above from the pathologization, dissad, and the pathologization, dissad, and particularly bad stuff. Anything else on
that? They say their model solves our offense because people will come to a conclusion over time. Say that's bad because people will run to the margins if there's no topic because it's usually incentives.
They can't solve our offense. Not on the counter interp. Obviously, if there's no limits on the topic, they cannot come to the same conclusion. People will just read whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I can't believe y'all actually prep like this.
They were more the whole time today. It was high your headphones on, didn't want to see it. That shit was probably was canceled.
Okay, I'm gonna do cap and psycho together, but
Yeah.
case, T, and then the cap and psycho.
Oh,
Gonna have to wait a second. I understand not noticing that Porcelain's gone, but like, you didn't see Drew leave the room.
Wait, Drew? Okay.
Been a long day. Yeah. This will probably be the best stream debate of the whole entire tournament.
Why?
We've had some good moments on here.
We have had some good moments.
Been explaining Go to Space. That was so, oh my god.
I thought it was space call for a second. I'm glad we had that class 6 thing because I was about to get up here and answer space call.
So you can work out the mechanics of the
Yeah.
5-minute 1 yard just.
I was about to talk about like the
space call is the will to reason.
Nah. I think I probably would have just been like, I'll do is one reproduce in space. That would-
You know those like policy cards about space call that's just egregiously bad.
Every second.
Alright.
I would have respected a pivot that was just like 1 hour impact turn space calls, like causes wars with aliens, causes space disease.
Who makes that argument in debate rounds ever?
I think
Anything starting with the word Glenbrook?
Space disease.
There's nothing else to say about making appearances on the team.
yes, I've never heard of space call.
Space disease.
Right, never. Definitely not.
Oh, I can't stretch this. I was gonna take it back that way and read some stuff. I was gonna give like a preview of the 1AR, but like it's in ASMR.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. With the band. Thank you for the charger. It's a bizarre flag, right?
With the feet, yeah. Isle of
What
Man.
do you think that is?
It's Isle of Man. So it's all UK flags. You got Wales, Ireland,
Okay,
Scotland, England, Isle of Man, something else.
nice. Good for you.
Yeah, there's a bunch of others though. The Normans. I think this is the Normans, but. I mean, whose classroom is this? I have no idea. No. I think like whoever taught in this classroom like resigned after the end of every single year of high school. When I was here, I'm pretty sure. It was always like 9th grade regs English, and they just got like bullied into leaving because the kids were so awful. Dang.
Westminster English teachers bully the kids.
Dude, our English teacher, he taught
in Ukraine last year.
Oh,
He was like right outside of Kyiv. Dude, he hasn't slept. He hasn't slept in like 4 weeks.
I can't imagine.
He comes to class every day and talks about how he like cries all the time. I feel so shitty.
Yeah.
I feel horrible. Because he's just like they should not be making teach right now. Like all of his friends and like all of his students are like.
Is he Ukrainian
out there.
or was
No,
he just
he
there?
actually he's like a super cool dude. So he was born in India.
That doesn't preclude him
Is he
being
Ukrainian?
Ukrainian.
No.
No. I have to explain. No, I have to explain his
That's
That's damning.
No, he was born in India, and then he went and studied abroad, and then he ended up doing philosophy at Dartmouth, and then from Dartmouth he got his PhD at Duke, I think, and then just like started traveling around the world teaching at different schools. So he's taught in like China, Ukraine, like where else he taught? Europe. And he's also taught in India. Yeah, he is cool.
Aesthetic philosophy or
what?
something else?
No, he's like analytical, but like I've talked to him about Kant and Heidegger before. I wrote an essay about Heidegger, and the coolest thing that's ever happened in school was I wrote an essay about Heidegger, and I wrote like on the exam that I couldn't remember the word, right? And I was like, you know that feeling you get when you do the thing, and then like I was trying to explain the concept because I couldn't remember the word, and he just like on the exam he just wrote the German. He didn't even write the English translation of the word. He wrote the German word for it. I was like, you're the coolest teacher I've ever met. Dr. Vasu, thank you if you're watching this live stream. I'm gonna make him watch this live stream now. Okay.
Are there any cards?
Yes. Drew sent some cards, and I might like send a card afterwards.
I'm so happy. I got Berkeley Factory one of our cards.
This is the first time all year. Oh yeah. Before I'm looking here for the order. Okay. Case, and then T, and then I'm gonna do the like psycho thing and the cap degrowth disad thing, BizCon, whatever. It's all together in one sort of aporia of sustainability, unsustainability, capitalism, rockets. Oh my. Okay.
Good going on.
Vote out to affirm the malaria music, the moment, aesthetic freedom, the one I see, artistic expression, negative dialectical approach, opens up the possibility of dialectical thoughts of non-identity, the rhythm of words brings us in tune, and nature's beauty expression, enabling a new kind of reason that finds value, not in history, but in the beauty of life and non-life itself, any other approach of reproducing philosophies, stats with the enlightenment, mythology, management, purpose of myth, and constitutes something to the human ability to identify coherent nature of the process of mythical observed history when in actuality nature does not exist in the possibly identifiable senses, worship, or rational capacity, grasp political domination, that produces a totally different society where freedom is taking the pursuit of control. The utility doesn't matter because we're going for sustainability stuff on the rest of debate too, but the climate nihilism and Nazism stuff doesn't answer the core thesis the Av. One is the Av occurs as aesthetic beauty, not their arguments are specific to the Av enough, which means that all their generalized expertise of aesthetics can be applied to the Av specific solvency mechanism, which resolves the Fassmann argument because it affirms the beauty of nature, which also affirms the climate nihilism stuff. Second is that Trumpism is not Jane's argument. Argument is about where we derive value from, not the political implications of the Av. Second is that aesthetics and affect are different, but they're also inevitable. You can't deny their existence and attempt to repress it because it also produces the violence of fascism. It's a way in which fascism operates. Hannah Arendt's banality of evil is a perfect explanation of the way in which evil, the way in which fascism replicates itself in the banal every day, rather than the non-aesthetic purging aesthetics is thus it's fundamentally violent. You shouldn't go to repress it. Third is that their evidence is about politicizing aesthetics. You have to do this. Rationality could suffer arguments that enlightenment rationality isn't rational enough. An aesthetic kind of rationality that has an actual anchor for value, which aesthetic rationality doesn't. The T debate, fairness of it's not true that aesthetic rationality it locates value in beauty, which is particular to each subject, which means that our impact categorically outweighs our obsession with debate, utility, the form of fairness, we're rational. They're the myth of being capable of providing meaning because and the shade of standards. They hope to locate value along the way. Our values arguments value exists outside of logical chain and non-identical debate should be considered as unique to itself. The joy we derive from it comes from non-identity. The moments of debate explanation and deny its core function because they use anti rationality, produce debate, utilitarian logic, or perpetual myth, the necessity of self-refinement, use value of everything we do, recreates culture, industry, version of debate, premise, the constituents of activity, create the mismanaged style policy, decoy, rising three model does its disaster, return education, the fast and decide, turn switch side debate, and all their offense first, is that they can read heads go in the app and egg, which fails to solve their model because they don't have to switch side at all. Their model debate defines some by difference, which provide logic by identity, their attempt to return to the tradition of nostalgic logic of fascism that brings debate under the hegemonic interpretation of policy, and at least sit along those lines. That's our own psycho impact, right? Their romanticism, the old creed to move towards more control over debate. It was never held by the flawed conception of identity in response to debate constant changes. They double down. They are rooting the obsessed idea that debate was the whole before case. It creates persisting ideological camps who are afraid to engage the other forces in joining the clash with framework neutralized autoimmune last opportunity debaters and scapegoating arguments. The argument isn't that he itself is policing, but that it fosters a model of debate. A vision of debate is stable, and frustration that it isn't stable causes lash out. Things like the spark apps, etc. prove the argument about lash out. They say no counter-interpretation. The counter-interpretation arguments that their offense and evolution value based on who did the better trading. Judge criteria for persuasion rather than technique. Every argument has its logical flaws. To mean an autonomous model doesn't alter clash central, only convention debate itself. This process already happening. And that will only question if we have alignment on identity framework. It makes enlightenment science in nature, but indicating all the consecutive debates to in India. There are many internal identities of debate, which proves that their model of ahistorical PVA doesn't matter. It doesn't solve any of our offense or our dissets, which proves it doesn't matter. The top level defense, K teams don't go away when you vote negative. Proves the race of the market stuff is just the truth. Their model, the history based autonomous involves constantly your tone on identity. Saying about the history debate, moving through case whole resident plan debate CPs, which proves an identity argument. The cap stuff, the state of the world now is irrelevant to the future of capitalism. Their overview makes claims about the status quo. Ours projects about the future. One of exhausting subjectivities root cause belief in conceptual capacity, justified resource exploitation, attempt to harmonize with nature. Are these come force capitalism, self-fully process that doubles down on false belief in the accuracy of concepts, which produces inevitable failure and scapegoating means operates to solve climate change impossible argument about resource sources. Not that we actually need to consume them, but rather that our frustration with our own inability to create stable climates actually cause extinction through the escalation of fascist conflicts and racialized scapegoating. Either happens so sustainable, unique, so it also means there's no link. Actually, I'm not going to go for the no link stuff. We're just going to do the sustainability stuff. The environmental traction good stuff doesn't matter. We're not abandoning it. We're not abandoning that cause of climate extinction. New IPCC report from February 28 gave us 9 years to reverse the effects of climate change, which means that environmental extractivism is bad and that we don't have enough time to innovate technologies to get around it. It's not tax code because we want to see that's what I'm not going to go for. The Fletcher stuff. Policies won't accept because it's too restrictive. Their goals probably the middle class. You see materialization trying to been around since the Industrial Revolution and have been consistently failed to neutralize overall growth resources. Not to use which have paradox. 5 is absolute decoupling require the closure of cycle matter, which isn't very practically possible to do with inventory entry. All recycling is down cycle for limited resources. Now at these days, some matter just made its inflation price would rise as impossible leverage would break the market. Also, be dependent on cheap labor because companies have to internalize environmental costs, state profits, earn property, space resource. We don't have time. We haven't developed the space resource mining anyway. The hand is father evidence. It doesn't assume the new IPCC report. 9 years and 9 years plus their data is wrong about the offshoring stuff because you don't have enough time. That's Fletcher stuff. The 11 Boeing is Carter in 27. I'll send it after. Even the world already decarbonizing greenhouse gas already. In the after carbon emissions will make some very significant economic effects on the world. We're trending next year with climate change right 32 1 from 32 million people in poverty.
Yeah.
Oh, what card was that? Sorry.
Yeah, I said I'd send it out after. Sorry. I read a different card, dude, because I wanted to read a card from the IPCC report.
Okay. I swear.
714. No problem. I'll work on this. Okay.
Something that starts with
Wait, did I already send a card?
Oh, and you didn't read any of those other cap good cards?
No.
Or cap bad cards?
No.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Viscontier. T case. Porcelain still didn't laugh at the joke.
You can try that.
Okay. Everybody good? Cool.
We all agree that extinction outweighs, as per the 1 hour consensus, which makes it really awkward given the 1 hour flat drops and impact. Even if you are correct that capitalism is sustainable, and even if you're correct about the recalls of war, you concede the card that nobody can pronounce the name of this is that tech innovation is good, and concede the link that they have definitely rejects technology. That they concede that technology solves extinction because it's key to things like regulated AI and resilience to things like super volcanoes and asteroid impacts which cause extinction. All of that was flat dropped. Even if they're correct that even if they're correct that technology can't solve warming, it is completely irrelevant. And everything I'm going to do after this is purely defensive. Means any risk of right about answer, and any risk of right about sustainability is sufficient. Any risk of right about sustainability is sufficient because all we need is a 1% risk of offense to when it happens faster than your offense because it takes longer, which I'll do below. They say that they solve the recalls of war from doing more than sustainability below, but they're wrong. They are asserting without any evidence that scapegoating and a lack of aesthetics is the root cause of every war ever. They're wrong. Which evidence says a litany of data from the past couple centuries says that historically wars are motivated by differences in power because realism is true and states will only act if they they think that it's in their best interest to do so because they're inherently self-interested. There's no examples in the 1 hour of wars that are motivated by purely aesthetic factors, which means they should err heavily negative. But this is a unique offense anyway, because even if they're correct that they act as a root cause, it is not reverse causal because the lack of frustration, sort of anxiety does not stop wars from happening because the economic factors still clearly exist. So at worst, this is not offense for them. No, this is not offense for them. Now, the sustainability to be a proper frustration argument is wrong because the empirics root this frustration around the climate anxiety has been a thing for decades, but decoupling is still happening. All evidence is happening now and accelerating into the future. I'm going to answer the warrants here. They say that innovation isn't quick enough. You haven't heard a comment about this either. Yes, innovation might take a couple years to develop, but logically, a societal transition away from capitalism would take far longer. Even if you're correct that it would take a couple years to scale of technology to solve warming, then obviously they would take longer to do to have a transition away from capitalism solve warming because it would require a total overhaul of all this institutional dropping. The link means that you do that, but no evidence that they have heard a transitional card that says that would be effective or that would happen quickly. Even if you think innovation takes a while, their internal link is clearly longer, and we write several parts like the House Father. This is happening now, has been happening for decades. But even if we're correct about the innovation argument, there's a couple other warrants are dropped versus decoupling solves. It's not just about innovation, but the argument that people will choose to consume less in the future. So even if the innovation fails, it's completely no responsive prediction of peak oil emissions having that lost pollution, air, and water. Being been incorrect consensus studies prove that positive trends in the countries are already decoupling now. House Father points to 32 countries have already decoupled emissions from growth. This House Father, that's the House Father evidence means that even if they're right that innovation fails, it's not better because people will choose to decrease their consumption because the EKC, the environmental consequence curve, is a true thesis in this drop that now in the line by line. All of their warrants here, they say the Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox is wrong. Tech changes, the technology changes the elasticity of demand, which means that even when things become cheaper, there isn't necessarily a rebound or more demand. The coffee points to specific examples of fracking making natural gas cheaper, but that didn't increase. But the companies still opting out of buying credits, which is the inverse of what they're, which is what the inverse of their, which is the inverse of the posture. They say that random shocks will break the market. You're wrong. Drop the Ruiz evidence that says that random small shocks to the market have happened historically. Capitalism is really because of the accumulation of capital. They say capitalism is relying on cheap labor. Even if you're correct about this, they've heard a card that says that this is sufficient to cause it calls it capitalism. But the McAfee evidence is dropped and says that cheap labor is declining because inequality is declining on a global scale because markets are the most efficient way to redistribute resources. So we saw that, but this isn't the impact. There's no impact in this because they've not read a card that says cheap labor causes the collapse of capitalism. The new IPCC report card is just awful. I'm sorry that you like the report a lot, but it just doesn't say anything. It says that within the next decade, millions of people will be driven to poverty because of global warming. They consider that capitalism is the best way to solve this because it allocates resources in the most efficient manner and brings people out of poverty, which solves this. They do not solve it, even if they are correct that warming is happening within the next decade. That is not responsive to anything because we're reading cards that innovation is faster. The offshoring warrant on the back was also wrong. House Father evidence is way better. The sorting time frame is irrelevant because Zach just sort of asserts that offshoring is happening and that we don't solve it quick enough. Wrong. House Father evidence says that offshoring has been declining and it's been happening for decades. So time frame stuff is relevant. T. Yeah, none of this is offense because we're not going for it. They conceded the link debate on the cap thing, so no pivoting to like we only adopt this ethic in debate because they've conceded that applying their politics in the real world is bad because it collapses capitalism. The case. At the top, drop the rationality, or actually, I don't really need that because we're not going for T anymore. Affect is fascist. We're ahead on this. The fact that they affirm an aesthetic of beauty is non-responsive because that aesthetic produces bad things. People in Nazi Germany thought that Hitler's movement was beautiful because they liked the way it felt. The fact that aesthetics is a nebulous and ill-defined concept means that only affirming aesthetic of beauty does not do anything because people will interpret that however they want historically, making politics based off of only how you feel and your innate gut reaction to things. Even if you think things are beautiful, it's bad. Think about Trump supporters. They also think that Trump is beautiful and that the way he's conducted things is good, but they base their politics on aesthetics because they think we should ignore evidence because scientists are bad and think that instead we should base politics on gut reaction to things, which is bad and produce fascism. But independently, yeah, you don't solve anything because it's just as likely to produce bad stuff, but extinction at ways, so this is kind of irrelevant. Card talk, I assume. I'll just make one. People can decide if they want it.
Screw that.
Here's one letting this happen. Probably that this happened after this paper. Just use your pen. The pen doesn't work. What? Just sit here. Don't worry, I'll figure it out. It's making me have to use the pen. Does that good to you? Yeah, you should probably do it. That'd be great. Really good thing that technical difficulties happened after the two. Where's the case content? Just put all those ones in all the way completely. Actually, I think I got all of them.
Case is whatever. Here, come on. Stop. Okay. Both of you good?
Go.
Instrumental reasoning is the controlling impact of your decision calculus can guide all modern decision making and tech development in the first place. If you win a risk that instrumental reasoning is totally bad as it views objects as means to end and only does this function as an external impact turn to the dishonor because capitalism views things as means to profit, but also means that they get the worst version of cap, so they don't get that tech they think they get. Instrumental reasoning corrupts all forms of offense that they can, especially when they have defenses to what they have no defenses to why it's good in the first place. They continue every impact claim was through the one is the evidence culminates ecocide fascism, mastery that culminates in warfare between countries of the need to accurately conceptualize nature when it's in reality impossible. Reading instrumental reasoning makes it very tough for the negative because they don't get the tech used to stop all their existential threats that their evidence talks about, rather the form that is used to conduct eco-fascism that has produced the modern time crisis or inability to handle other forms of violence in the first place. Only the F solves this by taking a negative dialogue with poetry and aesthetics to embrace the non-identity, non-conceptuality nature through the work critique that happens to be engagement with Mahler. Hearing the dripping water helps you inform practices of aesthetic theory that evades the grasp of constituent subjectivity. Recognizing our vulnerability in the system of chaos, this creates also less after beauty that is outside the country. In a conversation of view like this evokes the limits to be made rather than acting with power like the negativity. The only argument they made a case that affect is bad. First, as Trump supporters do not think he's beautiful. They identify them actually begin themselves as high rational, acting their own self-interest, proves our dual critique of identity and instrumental rationality. One that is no maker for value being the cause of fashion. Second, we don't only have to defend the aesthetics of Muller and music, not more probably agrees. This doesn't apply to Jordan theory. He says that aesthetics must be able to speak to the suffering of nature and reveal it. Also reveals beauty, which doesn't find beauty in the suffering necessarily. The genocide debate at the top level framings of the post-structural crisis, ecological production. The 2 hour alludes to the possibility of innovation solving the future, but has no concrete reasons why innovation solved the IPCC report that doesn't already assume all their impacts for AI and super volcanoes happen in the far future. None of their cards actually establish an extinction level claim. They have no reason why their argument offense comes first. We are asserting is the root cause of every war. That war is motivated purely by aesthetics. Our argument is that fascism is premise of the logic identity. States operate in their own interests because they can conceive of a self-identity to begin with. This proves only our F solves the threat of warfare, which caused by frustration with the ability. Their impacts are even longer time frame than climate change because they've cited no ongoing possibility of asteroids or super volcanoes and to share on the side of a certain instrumental reason impact that you know you can solve by voting out for one of the status quo that just contempts us to remain trapped within the lack of aesthetic reason. The innovation happening now and happening for decades proves our argument that will continue to last for more decades. The IPCC was urgent that we need massive amounts of decarbonization immediately. The AF is the only mechanism to radically alter society by organizing around the aesthetic beauty of nature. The element is the only oversolvency. The IPCC carded impact is in poverty, so that we will feel the impacts of climate change by 2040. The IPCC itself has concluded we have 9 years before those impacts exceed climate inevitable. The problem with all their impacts is that we no longer have enough time. 9 years for climate change is in reversible. 50 years to start feeling the impacts of it. This is from the report that the land evidence cites. That means total disinvestment in emissions must happen now. Poverty increases in the future, and the only way to stop is by entering value in the aesthetic beauty of nature. Arguments about the future cosmos. They also drop the impact scenario that comes before all theirs. Arguments that fascism is caused by the voiding of aesthetics, by the reduction of all things to primus for identity reproduction happens as a result of logic identity. All the arguments about Trumpism, fascism, case are uniqueness rise coming now. Fascistic expansion necessitates frustrated wars with the ability for example hegemon to maintain stability, which is a logic identity that only the F solves. This means it's trying out the after impacts come first. The status quo gets infinitely worse. While they are attempting to design their technologies, and their technologies probably get used for warfare anyway due to the structural argument that they grab in the first place that controls how those techniques employed in the first place. That turns all their offense is sustainability debate problem. Or Fletcher's the best argument card in this debate on this question. Proving that unsustainability means all their offense is not unique. That's very easy for that to outweigh Henry's offense. Fletcher says the UNP the most qualified source and extensive source to define decoupling is necessary in correction to capitalism, but its own analysis undermines itself and why it's possible. First, Stephen polarization strategies have been around since the Industrial Revolution, and have they consistently failed to neutralize overall growth of resource consumption and use? They've actually increased in order in accordance with Jevons paradox, and observed economic phenomena which efficient gains of resource use paradox lead to greater resource use. The social attitude of getting more bang for our buck, so they get more time with them. The response to this is McAfee argument. McAfee doesn't assume things like the process of extracting, transporting, all those costs that are associated with it, which means that the response to Jevons paradox is void. The decoupling argument, people won't choose to stop consuming because they are too bound up with infrastructure reason, which means we control their control of the offense. The second word is materialization. It still has material consequences that are dependent on climate change and philosophy use extractive practices for things like space mining or finding necessary to create technology in the first place, to drive to constantly exploit the companies and more resource wars, and they double down on this competitive mindset of resource gathering, which is an independent fashion which will link to that turns their ability to actually generate the international cooperation necessary to solve all their existential effects. This capitalism ensures profit over anything else. These politicians won't accept decoupling because it's too restrictive to their goals of helping the middle class, reducing poverty. If you force physics, absolute decoupling will require the closure of the cycle of matter, which isn't practically possible due to the principle of entry. All recycling is downcycling for stock limited resources, and at some stage, some matter is dissipated for is stagnation, which is an infinite econ term for all their offense. The only offense is that random small shocks happen in the future, but it wouldn't just be a random small shocks. Our Fletcher Evans literally said that markets could no longer function over the internalization running environmental cost that causes prices to rise to impossible levels, like hamburgers at $200. This would functionally break the market, create more cycles of poverty. So even if capitalism is working right now, ensures that their decoupling strategy fails, it just results in economic decline and the destruction of all capitalist markets as prices rise. This turns their tech scenario because it means we don't have the market mechanisms to sustain this technological development, which is the frame at the top. Their tech is impossible to create because of a sudden increase in prices that makes it possible for companies to actually purchase in the first able to generate the technology to solve all the existential events they have identified.
Good idea.
What?
Good idea.